You know what's strange about the dead? They never truly leave. The living think death is silence, a blank void where voices end. But I know better. I have spent my life with the dead, and I have learned that they linger in the cool of carved corridors, in the spaces between painted gods on stone walls, in the hushed breaths of humans who enter where they should not. They whisper in the dust. They tremble in the torchlight. They wait for those who disturb their rest. My name is Khemu. I am a jackal dog of Egypt, born not for play nor for companionship, but for devotion, for watchfulness, for the service of Ampu, Anubis, the opener of the ways, guardian of the scales, judge of the heart. I was raised in shadow and silence, fed on the breath of incense and the hymns of priests, my paws taught to tread only where permission was granted, my eyes trained to see through both darkness and deceit. I guarded tombs no human dared to enter. I walked the knife edge between breath and dust. I stood where the living end and the dead begin. And in that place I learned the truth that all mortals will eventually taste. Death is not an end. Death is a kingdom, and every kingdom has a gatekeeper. My first memories were not of soft hands or grassy fields. They were of limestone beneath my paws and firelight flickering across painted gods. I was whelped in the season when the Nile swelled and retreated in the heat that bakes the desert white. My ears opened to the sound of chanting, my eyes opened to shadows cast by priests in long black robes. While other pups in the villages wrestled in sand and chased scraps thrown by laughing children, I was being taught the rhythm of sacred halls. I was taught to know the difference between a step that belongs and a step that defiles. I was taught to hear the tremor in a thief's breath before he even touched the gold. And above all, I was taught silence. For silence is the first language of the dead, and only a dog who understands it can serve as their guardian. The priests did not name me right away. To them, names carry power, and power must not be wasted on the unworthy. For my first year, I was simply the Black One. They tested me. Could I wait motionless in the dark, unseen but listening? Could I move without sound when stone corridors carried echoes like bells? Could I resist meat placed before me until permitted, proving that discipline outweighed hunger? I did all these things, and so they gave me a name, Khemu. It means black, and though it was simple, it was also sacred. For the black of fertile soil was the color of rebirth, the black of night, the canvas for the stars, the black of the jackal, the symbol of Anubis himself. With that name, I was not just a dog. I was an extension of law, of balance, of the line between what should be and what must not be. I grew to know the city of the dead as well as others know their villages. The necropolis stretched like a labyrinth, carved into the desert itself. I knew it by scent better than sight. The sharp salt of natron used to dry flesh, the sweet heaviness of myrrh and cedar oil, layered into linen wrappings, the mineral chill of limestone walls that had not felt sunlight since their carving. I could follow a single thread of frankincense down corridors twisting 100 ways. I could tell how long ago a craftsman had touched gold by the fading trace of his sweat. I could distinguish the sandal steps of priests, steady and unafraid, from the hurried scrabble of workers who feared what they built. To me, these tombs were not traps or prisons. They were homes, homes for the dead who had earned eternal sleep, homes that required guardianship as much as any palace under the sun. I was not alone in my duty. Priests came and went, robed men with shaved heads, hands stained with oils and ink, scribes scratched on papyrus by lamplight. Guards stood with bronze spears, their masks shaped like the jackal's head, pretending to be what I truly was. They all served, but none as I did. Their service lasted years, decades at most. Mine was for life. When a man tires, he can walk away. When a priest ages, another replaces him. But I was bound from the moment I could walk a straight line without breaking silence. I belonged to the tombs, and they belonged to me. I learned early that my loyalty was not really to men, not even to pharaohs. It was to balance itself, to the weight of truth measured against a feather, to the hush that must blanket the resting, to the law that order cannot be broken by greed. Humans speak of curses, but they misunderstand. There are no curses. There are only consequences for imbalance. There are only corrections. And when a man crosses where he should not, the correction is swift. Anubis does not chase. He watches, he weighs. But a dog will chase. A dog will tear down the mask of greed and bear it for what it is. I remember the first time the silence broke wrong. It was a new moon when the desert sky gleamed with stars like hammered nails set in velvet. My ears caught it first. 3 men, moving low, their sandals scraping against stone where sandals had no right to be. One breathed hard, the breath of a laborer used to hauling bricks. Another wheezed, his lungs delicate, like the scribes who lived hunched over their scrolls. The third coughed, a wet rasp he tried to stifle but could not. I could smell them even before they reached the outer wall. Sweat sour with fear, goat fat rubbed on their arms to keep skin from cracking, hearts beating like frightened hares. They whispered to each other, though whispers echo louder than shouts when spoken against stone. They carried bone chisels, and I could hear the scrape of their tools as they pried at mortar, meant never to be touched again. I waited at the priest's side. He held my lead, but his fingers tightened not to restrain me, only to remind himself he was not alone. He too had heard the sound. He too knew what came. When the chiseling stopped, when stone gave way with a hollow sigh, when the men squeezed through into the passage, the priest whispered, "Go." He did not say it to me. He said it to the law that rules even gods, but I obeyed anyway. They carried a torch. Its flame quivered, throwing jagged shapes across painted walls, making gods blink in sudden light. The thieves laughed nervously at their own shadows. But laughter dies quickly in tombs. The walls do not forgive it. I moved silently, the pads of my paws noiseless against stone, my body blacker than the shadows. I circled them, testing their courage. They smelled of greed, but beneath it, fear. Fear is always there, coiled under ambition, ready to choke it. I felt their eyes dart, their hands tighten on chisels that could not harm me. One tried to steady himself by touching a painted god on the wall. His fingers trembled. The torch sputtered, and that was when they understood. They were not alone. The torchlight wavered, spilling restless shadows across the chamber walls. The thieves pressed deeper, their whispers rising to panicked mutters, the sound ricocheting off painted stone so that it seemed the gods themselves answered back. I slinked low, silent, my paws gliding across dust no wind had touched for centuries. My ears pricked to every sound, the scrape of sandal leather, the hitch of frightened breaths, the faint clatter of a chisel dropped by fingers slick with sweat. They thought the tomb was theirs now, but a tomb is never owned by the living. It belongs to the dead, and the dead do not give back what is theirs. The first thief, the one with reed-thin lungs, trailed behind the others. His hand trembled as he carried the torch, his light barely steady. I followed his limping steps, closing the distance until my breath fogged the back of his calf. He froze. The others kept moving, unaware. He turned, eyes wide, torch raised. Its light caught the painted jackal on the wall, black, lean, eternal. For a heartbeat, he thought it was only paint. Then he saw me. The torch shook in his grip. He tried to cry out, but only a strangled sound left his throat. That was enough. Fear spread through the chamber like smoke. The coffer spun, the torchlight sweeping wildly, splashing shadows across hieroglyphs that warned of judgment and scales. He cursed softly, his voice breaking, the kind of curse a man spits when he knows no God will hear him. "It's only a dog," he hissed, though his hands trembled. But the words rang hollow even to him. For I was not only a dog, I was Anubis's shadow, a servant of balance. My silence was older than their greed, my teeth sharper than their courage. The laborer pressed forward, greedy eyes fixed on the treasure chamber ahead. He shoved aside a limestone slab and ducked through, his companions stumbling behind him. The air inside grew colder. They noticed it, though they would not admit it aloud. Torches always sputter when the dead stir. I padded after them, the stone cool beneath my paws, my nose filled with the thick scent of cedar and resin. Ahead, the chamber widened, its walls alive with painted constellations, the ceiling so blue it seemed the sky had been pulled inside and pinned with stars. In the center lay the sarcophagus, massive, gold-laden, carved with the king's face frozen in eternal calm. The men gasped, but not with reverence, with hunger. Their eyes glowed like hyenas at a carcass. They whispered fast, frantic, their words tripping over one another as they pointed to the treasures laid around the king, chests of lapis and carnelian, necklaces gleaming in faint torchlight, jars of alabaster, a mirror polished so bright it seemed to reflect souls. They rushed, clawing at offerings meant for eternity. The reed-lunged one dropped his torch in his scramble, and for an instant the room plunged into darkness. When he relit it, the painted gods on the wall seemed closer. I watched him swallow hard, his eyes darting to the shadows as though expecting them to move. They piled their greed into a linen shroud, tugging its corners into a makeshift sling. Jewels clinked against one another, gold scraped across stone. Every sound was an insult to the silence. I circled them, my claws clicking softly, deliberately, a metronome for their guilt. They flinched at each sound. The coffer spat curses into the dark, as if words could ward off what they could not see. The laborer laughed, a harsh bark of triumph. But his laugh collapsed when he caught my eyes gleaming from the shadows. He dropped a golden jar, the clang echoing like thunder. The chamber seemed to tremble with it. Then the air shifted. It always does when the dead awaken. A sudden coolness poured in, unnatural in the depths of stone. Their torches flickered, flames shrinking low as if bowing. The painted stars above them seemed to shimmer, faintly like real ones. The men stiffened. The reed-lunged thief pressed his palm against a false door, painted for the Ka to pass through. "Open," he whispered, though it was only paint, only stone. His hand trembled, his torch dimmed further, and in that dimness, my shadow stretched impossibly long across the floor until it touched them. They gasped. They felt me. They felt the weight of something older than their names. I growled, not a bark, not a snarl, but a low sound, deep as earth shifting. It rolled through the chamber, through their bones, through their lies. The reed-lunged thief dropped his torch again. This time, it did not relight. Darkness flooded the room. But this was not mere absence of light. It was presence. A living darkness, thick and heavy, pressing against their chests, filling their mouths with dust and silence. They clutched at one another, gasping, their treasures spilling from the linen in their panic. Gold scattered across the floor, jewels rolled into shadows. One tried to speak, but his voice was swallowed before it could reach his own ears. I moved among them, unseen but felt, my paws stirring nothing but dread. My growl rose, not from my throat, but from the walls themselves, echoing from painted gods, vibrating from the sarcophagus lid. They screamed then, high and broken, their courage shattered. The coffer stumbled backward, his foot catching on a chest of canopic jars. It toppled, one shattering, its contents spilling in a reek of ancient decay. His scream turned to retching as he collapsed, clutching his stomach. The reed-lunged one bolted for the exit, but the priest's stone wedge still sealed the way. He clawed at it, sobbing, nails breaking against limestone. The laborer swung his torch wildly, but the flame died with a hiss, as if the air itself had refused to feed it. The chamber pulsed with whispers then. Not mine, not theirs. Whispers rising from the walls, from the painted mouths of gods, from the hieroglyphs themselves. Words in the old tongue, not meant for ears still alive. The thieves pressed their palms to their ears, but it did not stop. The whispers crawled into their skulls, filled their lungs, pressed against their hearts. They dropped their treasures, dropped their courage, dropped even their names. Their screams cracked, dissolved into whimpers, into prayers they could not remember. They were undone. I did not kill them. That is not my task. Balance does not hunger for blood. It hungers for correction. and correction had found them. When other men discovered their bodies days later, they said the thieves had fought among themselves, turned on one another in madness, left claw marks in their own flesh. They said fear had driven them to frenzy. That was a story men told themselves, for men always need stories to explain what they do not understand. But I know the truth. They were weighed. They were found wanting, and the tomb itself refused to let them leave as they had come. The priest said little. They cleaned the chamber, repaired the broken jars, and rolled the linen back to its corner without ever opening the small wooden box of letters it contained. Such things were meant for eternity, not for men who stumble through the dark. One priest brushed my ears with his fingers as he passed, not in affection, but in gratitude. He did not need to say the words. I had done my duty. I had been what I was born to be, a gatekeeper. But duty is never done. Word spread, and with time, more came. Some wore different clothes, carried sharper tools, spoke languages that rang strange in my ears. But they all smelled the same, greed laced with fear. They all carried the same hunger in their eyes, and each time I was waiting. Each time the tomb stirred with me. The years pressed on, as relentless as the Nile's flood, and I grew old within the labyrinth of stone. My muzzle silvered, my paws slowed, and each winter chill clung longer to my joints. But still I kept my watch. A dog of Anubis does not retire. Duty holds longer than sinew, sharper than teeth. I learned to move less and listen more, to let the silence itself carry my strength. The priests who had raised me also aged, their robes fraying, their steps unsteady. One by one they joined the very dead they had tended. And still I remained, guarding, waiting, belonging more to the tomb than to the sunlit world above. The day of my death was a gentle one. The desert sky glared as it always did, pale and merciless. But inside the temple it was cool and dim. The priest who had trained me as a pup knelt beside me. His face was carved with time, his breath shallow, yet his hand was steady as he placed an amulet at my chest. It was shaped like a jackal, small and dark, carved from black stone pulled from the desert's heart. He whispered words I had heard many times, words he had taught me with every command and every silence. Gatekeeper, go where you always stand. His voice trembled, but it carried the weight of eternity. My last breath was not a struggle. It was a passing, as soft as sand slipping between stones. And when my body stilled, my duty did not end. The tomb held me. The threshold would not let me go. Death did not release me. It claimed me more fully. If you ask me when I became spirit rather than flesh, I will tell you this. It was not in that final breath. It was long before, on the night I first chased intruders through corridors where they did not belong. From the moment I stepped into darkness without fear, from the moment I bared my teeth at greed under painted stars, I was no longer just bone and sinew. I had already become part of the law that guards eternity. Death only confirmed what duty had already made me. My body was gone, but my paws still trod the same worn paths. My ears still caught the tremor of footsteps. My growl still rumbled in the chambers, though no lungs drew breath to shape it. I was bound not by chains, but by devotion. Centuries widened and broke apart like sandstone in flood. Dynasties rose, their kings carving their faces into stone, only to be swallowed by time. New rulers came, speaking the old gods' names but wearing different crowns. Foreigners marched in with bronze, then with iron, then with banners no Egyptian had ever seen. Still the tombs remained, silent and watchful. Men came to rob them again and again, and each time they felt me. They felt the air grow heavy. They felt their torches sputter. They heard claws scrape where no beast should walk. They fled, babbling curses and stories of spirits with jackal heads, of shadows with teeth. They were not wrong, but not all were thieves. Some came with scrolls and ink, with curious minds rather than hungry hands. They called themselves scholars, seekers of knowledge. They broke seals with trembling reverence rather than arrogance, unrolling papyrus that had slept longer than empires. Some came with chisels, not for greed, but for study, carving copies of hieroglyphs into wax. They took, yes, but they also recorded, preserved, carried our voices into a future even we could not imagine. I watched them, weighed them, and though I unsettled their dreams, I did not stop them. For their hands carried balance of a different kind. Knowledge, too, has guardians. And then came the worst kind of men, the ones who called themselves collectors. They carried nothing but greed disguised as curiosity. They pried gold from coffins, jewels from mummies, statues from altars, breaking them free as if eternity were theirs to scatter. They shipped sacred things across seas, displayed them under foreign roofs, stripped them of silence and made them spectacles. Those men felt me most. In their tents at night they shivered when no wind stirred. They heard growls in languages their tongues could not form. Some went mad. Some died in deserts that swallowed them whole. And still they never understood. It was not a curse. It was balance. It was correction. It was the reminder that not everything can be taken. Now centuries are as nothing to me. I walk still. My paws echo on stone that remembers every step. The painted gods do not fade for me. They move, they watch, they whisper. Sometimes children come with their families, drawn into tombs now lit by strange lamps brighter than 100 torches. The children smile at the jackal painted on the walls. They point and laugh, saying it looks like a dog they know. Their innocence warms me, for the dead love to be remembered without fear. Sometimes a child will linger at a threshold, pause and stare into the shadows. Their parents tug them along, but the child whispers to themselves, "There's a dog here." And they are right, they see me. For children's eyes are not yet clouded by greed. If you, listener, ever step into a tomb, remember this. It is not empty. The air will tell you so. It will weigh heavy on your shoulders. It will hush your breath. It will curl around your heart. If you hear claws clicking softly where no living animal could be, do not mock it. Do not call it a curse. It is me. It is balance. Turn back if your hands reach for what is not yours. Leave offerings instead. Bread, water, a word of reverence. Speak the names carved into stone. That is what the dead want. To be remembered, not robbed. I am Khemu, once flesh, now shadow. Jackal dog of Anubis, guardian of tombs no human dared enter. I have seen men fall to greed. I have seen kings forgotten. I have seen God's names reshaped, but never erased. And I remain. Always I remain. For as long as the tombs stand, I will walk their halls. And if ever you feel the air grow colder in a chamber where the dead lie, if ever you hear a growl without a throat to shape it, know this. You are not alone. You have stepped into my kingdom, and I will weigh you. If your heart is light, you may pass in peace. If it is heavy, you will know me not as a guardian, but as the last sound you hear before silence claims you. And so I wait, century after century, paw after pawfall, guarding what is eternal. The world above changes, crumbles, burns, rebuilds. But here in the cool silence of the tomb, I keep watch. For the dead do not leave, and neither do I.